From the WKYT studios in Lexington, this is Kentucky Newsmakers with Bill Bryant.
Good morning from WKYT. I'm Bill Bryant. Traffic in Lexington, from one-way streets to those traffic lights popping up around the city. What is the strategy for keeping people moving and safe? A top city engineer, Dowell Hoskins Squire, will be joining us shortly. But first, with just over a week to go before Kentucky's May partisan primary, there have been allegations and strong denials and tales of stories being spread. It's been ugly enough to get the attention of national media outlets, including the Washington Post. And it comes at a time when Kentucky's primary turnout is already expected to be low. In fact, it was just 10% in the competitive 2011 gubernatorial primary. Kentuckians identified jobs and education as some top priorities, but so much of the talk, even the campaign ads, have been about other things. Dr. Stephen Voss heads up undergraduate studies in political science at the University of Kentucky. He's going to be moving on to more research now. He's often quoted as a political expert around the country. Dr. Voss, who has been on the UK faculty for 17 years, good enough to come in and give us some perspective, and we appreciate that. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, Bill.
With all the allegations and the denials that have been flying in the governor's race, what is the effect on voters who see that what is not being discussed right now is policy that would be handed down from state government or issues that are facing the Commonwealth?
Voters usually don't respond the way we want them to issues and policy debates. I mean, that's the sort of the intellectual version of political activity, but it's not the way voters are usually motivated. They're more based on a sense of how things are going, what direction they'd like to see the overall state, in this case, move. So I don't think they're likely too upset that the fight's not about issues and issue positions. Scandal, though, mudslinging does bother them. One of the things they say repeatedly is they don't like how nasty and partisan the political system gets. And so the scandal part probably is bothering a lot of people.
When you have two major campaigns, as we see now, Comer and Heiner certainly have been fighting each other very strongly here in the last few days, and all kinds of things being said back and forth. Does that open the door if there is, another viable candidate, or maybe in this case two other viable candidates for governor? The
only thing definitive you can say is it's rolling the roulette wheel and really adding a huge random element. There are cases where scandal helped the accusers, and hurt the side being accused. There are cases where a sympathetic reaction responded, a sense that this isn't how our election was supposed to be decided, and the people who are accused benefit. And then when you have a third party, it's not uncommon to see people figure if they're going to fight, I'll go find a third option. There are elections that have gone every which way.
Matt Bevin apparently trying to take advantage of that potential right now by running ads that have children fighting kind of thing.
And he was already judging from the Bluegrass poll, he was already in second place in every region. So he is certainly well positioned to take advantage of the conflict.
Dr. Voss, our voter turnout is expected to be low. It was just 10% in 2011 when there was the race that year between Phil Moffitt and David Williams in the primary. It got a lot of attention, but still 143,000 people, that's all that voted that year. So if that's to be the case this time, you're talking about maybe a winner could come out of the primary with 40,000 votes or so. Does that make it hard to lift off a fall campaign if you start with a small universe?
Not too much. If you didn't motivate people to register, to get on the voter rolls, it can make it hard to get your sort of core supporters or your potential supporters into the voter rolls in time for the general election. So you can have that difficulty. But this is not uncommon for primaries or side elections to get low turnout. It doesn't really change the politics in the fundamental way, because by the time the general election rolls around, people are paying attention to who those two candidates are. It makes it a different election.
All four Republicans say they will support the eventual GOP nominee, but will it be hard with the turmoil and the acrimony that we've seen in the primary campaign for them to give those handshakes and go on and support the nominee in November?
It may be difficult for them personally, but I don't know how much that matters. I mean, endorsements and, again, that's the kind of thing we pay attention to, but the regular voter doesn't generally seem that influenced by that sort of thing. So, if you had one Republican refusing to endorse the party's standard bearer, it's not clear voters are going to care. Even their own supporters are going to care that much. You might see some drop off. And a conflict-ridden primary isn't as bad as we think. Yes, it makes them spend money, and the less money they have going into the general election, the worse off they are. But it also means people have been paying attention to them longer. Their side, their party, has been involved in the election longer, whereas the Democrats who don't have this sort of thing going on, those voters are sleepier right now, and it can be hard to wake them up.
Well, the Republicans expect to face Jack Conway at the top of the Democratic ticket. Jeff Young has run a more limited campaign for that party's nomination. Is it a luxury for the winner of the Democratic nomination to sit back and have this fight going on the Republican side and be able to maybe, as you say, raise some money and have that available for the campaign?
Yeah, that's the flip side of what I just said. Yeah. On the plus side, right, Jack Conway isn't spending much money right now, and he doesn't need to, and he can build up the resources, build up the organization. But at the same time, he doesn't have his core supporters being motivated by the attention that the Republican side is getting. So he will have some work to do. He's not being defined right now in the public mind, and that means that may wait until the general election. Look back to our Senate race last year. People thought McConnell was going into the general election fairly weak because he had to fight Bevin. They thought Secretary of State Grimes was strong. She looked that way in the polls. She'd had the luxury of limited conflict, but it didn't really play out to her advantage. What it meant is she didn't start getting defined in the voters' minds until McConnell was able to turn his attention her way and battle over how she would be defined.
Why is the governorship more elusive for Kentucky Republicans when they hold all but one of the U.S. House seats, they hold both of the U.S. Senate seats, they have tremendous control in the state Senate at this point? Why is that governorship so elusive?
This isn't uncommon when you have a state that's either especially Republican or especially Democratic in national politics. When you're electing a senator, when you're voting for president, the state knows where it sits. It's either conservative, it's either liberal. But when you go look at state politics, the Republicans in a Democratic state, or in this case the Democrats in a Republican state, have been able to shape a platform that fits with the state better than the national party did. So you'll see competitive Democrats at the state level in a Republican state like this. Especially true in the South. I mean, the southern states, which Kentucky is sort of one, southern states have a long tradition of a southern Democratic Party being able to compete even as the national Democratic Party is getting trounced in their elections.
Would you say Kentucky is an outlier right now in terms of all the southern states have the Republican-controlled legislatures, most of them are Republican governors in those states, and there's a Democratic House in Kentucky and a Democratic governor at this point?
Yeah, the deep South states, the southern states managed to resist that shift to the Republican Party for a while, but when it came big, and the Republicans swept the deep South. Kentucky both had a stronger Republican Party at first, but it didn't have that fast move to the conservative southern Republicans that happened elsewhere. So yes, compared to other southern states, we're a bit of an outlier because the Democratic Party is stronger than usual.
Dr. Stephen Voss is with us. He's a UK political scientist who is often quoted around the country. We'll talk a little bit about the 2016 election and this caucus that is supposedly going to be held in Kentucky, that and more. And then we're coming back and talking about Lexington traffic on Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome back in. It's Kentucky Newsmakers on WKYT, and we are glad you are with us today. We've talked about this interesting year to come in Kentucky politics. It should be an interesting race regardless in the fall here in Kentucky, right, in the governor's race.
Well, it's political off-season, right? We hold a governor's election when the national elections aren't taking place, so it's one of the few places the country can look to see, how things are going with the Democrats versus the Republicans.
You see a lot of national attention and national money coming in as a result of that?
The stakes are not as high, so that can limit the money a little bit, but the political junkies need something to watch, and we're one of the few shows on right now.
Well, they'll be looking for harbingers for 2016, and then here we come, you know, and it could be an interesting year, and part of that intrigue begins here in Kentucky, where Senator Rand Paul has apparently convinced the Kentucky Republicans that since he can't be on the ballot twice, and he wants to run for re-election to the U.S. Senate and for the White House, that Kentucky Republicans hold a caucus next spring. What do you make of that?
Well, you know, we were talking earlier about low turnout, and a caucus election is similar to a low turnout election in that it requires more from people to get involved. So you tend to have more of the activists, the people who are more ideological in the party having more influence over the outcome. In terms of the implications for us of switching to that system, that's the big one that would stick around if we stay that way.
With no experience doing this in modern times anyway in Kentucky, will it be difficult for the Kentucky Republicans to hold an effective caucus?
No, I don't think so. I mean, these are very informal institutions anyway, and they're time-consuming, but they're informal. And that's why some political scientists praise the caucus, because it does have people who are more committed to the system, who are more involved in making a decision than a primary where all you do is wander into the voting booth in your fire station or your school or community center, pull a lever. It's not as communal.
Does Rand Paul, has he made any kind of mistake as far as strategy in saying that he has to win in New Hampshire in that first primary?
Well, I guess if he's right, then there was no mistake saying it. But you know, usually they try to downplay the expectations, so that when they do better than they led you to expect, they get good news coverage. Say, oh, look at this wonderful performance. But in this case, you know, that is such an important state in general. It's even more so, I think, an important state for Paul. I don't know that he put himself at much risk by saying that.
What do you anticipate next year, with a huge political year, with a new president being elected, a new Congress being elected, or at least a third of the Senate, and certainly a new House? What do you think next year's election will be about in this country?
Well, it will be intense and expensive, but which issues will ultimately rise? You know, I don't have that crystal ball. You know, if the economy turns south, it will be about the economy. If our foreign involvements turn south, it will be about foreign affairs. You can't know.
You talk with students all the time, and they're generally majoring in political science or government or heading on to careers in law and so forth, and so I'm sure they're pretty engaged in what's going on. Do you have a problem, do you think we have a problem in this country with people not being civically engaged, not knowing enough about their government to operate it as a democracy must have?
You know, we're problem solvers, and we're clever, and we know that usually elections will turn out how they're going to turn out, and we as individuals can't have much effect on them. And it's a lot of work to build up all the information you need to vote intelligently. No, I think, you know, usually people sit it out because they're reasonably happy with the way things are going, and they coast. And we tend to be negative about that. People aren't meeting their civic duty, but it's sensible to save yourself work. Really, when the system gets flooded with lots of activity, it can be a sign of trouble. It means that so many people are unhappy that they're turning to politics to find solutions. So when you see turnout ramping up, it may be a sign you're headed to a crisis or something that's going to fundamentally change the political system.
A large segment of Americans these days identify themselves with neither party. They'll call themselves independent. Do you see that trend continuing?
Okay, that whole movement toward independence, that's a bit of a fib. Okay. People say they're independent, but what we do in political science is we ask a follow-up question. Say, okay, you're independent. You think for yourself, but do you lean to the Democrats or do you lean to the Republicans? And they'll fess up. Yeah, I tend to be a Republican. Well, when we actually look at how they vote, those people who pretended to be independent are voting as loyally for their party toward which they lean as the ones who admitted up front that they were partisans, but not strong ones. So the rise of independence is a bit of a myth. Most people have their party ID, and their party is what governs their choices. What's really changed is we want to think of ourselves as independent. You know,
Yeah.
being a team player used to be cool. Now being cool is saying, oh, I weigh my choices. I'm independent. So we pat ourselves on the back for that.
Very interesting discussion. I really appreciate you coming in. Thank you very much, Dr. Stephen Voss from the UK Department of Political Science. And we're coming back in just a moment. Lexington traffic. A new study looks at downtown traffic and two-way streets. We're back in a moment. Welcome back to Kentucky Newsmakers here on WKYT. Lexington traffic is always a subject of discussion, especially when there's talk of some changes. A few years ago, the city decided to look into the feasibility of making some of the many one-way streets downtown open to two-way traffic. Many said it would make a more cohesive downtown and return some charm of the past. Some critics have said it could really slow down things and congest the heart of the city. Well, Dowell Hoskin Squire is Director of Traffic Engineering in Lexington. She's here to talk about that, and we'll get in a few other traffic questions as well. We really do appreciate you coming in. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
You know, your background itself is interesting in that you grew up here, had a professional career in Nashville, and now you're back. So
Right.
What is your perspective?
Right, and I think that's one huge advantage that I bring to Lexington. I worked in traffic engineering and consulting in Nashville, and not to get off the topic of my background, but I think Nashville has a huge success story to tell, especially in terms of downtown revitalization. And I think we hope that Lexington can see some of that same economic success that Nashville's seen. But back to my background, I went to Vanderbilt in Nashville and ended up staying 12 years after school, and then ultimately wanted to return back to Lexington. And so this has been a great opportunity.
Well, we're glad to have you back. All right, Dal. So let's talk about downtown and why. What would you say to somebody who said, "Well, what's broken about downtown? You can get in and out. There are a few streets where the traffic is slower." What was the idea behind looking at the possibility of going to two-way traffic?
Absolutely. There's been several studies that have recommended that that's one of the things that the city should look at, is returning the one-way streets to two-way. And I think it's more about a broader economic revitalization of downtown rather than all about traffic and traffic impacts. I think what we hope that the two-way street conversion would do is increase pedestrian safety by slowing travel speeds downtown. It would bring more retail downtown. I think two-way streets are more inviting. It's a more walkable kind of urban downtown feel rather than one-way streets where traffic is barreling through as fast as they can get through. So I think it's about that broader economic revitalization.
Is it as safe if traffic's going both ways?
I think so, yes, and it's safer for pedestrians. Traffic should be going slower, so that's better for pedestrian safety. You may have additional turning conflicts at intersections, which people say, well, that increases or decreases safety. But I think in the end, I think it's better. It makes a more walkable urban environment, which I think is what we want to achieve.
All right, so this study was conducted, and it came back, and it said, don't do it on Main Street and Vine Street, but consider several streets to the north of downtown.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
Yes. So what the outcome of the study said was that the north area streets, so the city was segmented into three areas: the south, which is primarily around UK campus, High and Maxwell, South Upper and South Limestone, the core area, Main and Vine, and then the north area, which is North Limestone, North Upper, Short, and Second. And the results of the study indicated that the traffic impacts in the north area are minimal, if any. So there's no increase in delay, no increase in congestion, but there's huge benefits. And so really the benefits outweigh the cost. There's better circulation. You may see where you want to go in the north area now, and you may have to drive 5 blocks out of your way to get back to that location.
Sure.
I'm sure you've experienced that. Everybody's
Absolutely.
experienced that. So better traffic circulation is key. It's key if we want to encourage more visitors to downtown. It just makes downtown a better, more visitor-friendly place. And then also the pedestrian safety issue. Also, if you're driving down one-way streets, you miss a lot of businesses as you're driving through. Just your field of vision is more narrow. And so if you've got traffic coming in both directions, the travel that's going in the opposite direction, you see more businesses. So the consultant did a study on that as well.
So these the consultants looked at this and they said you better keep a quick way in and out of town, right?
The issue with Main and Vine primarily is those streets are on the national highway system, and so there's other issues associated with that in terms of impacts to the freight movement and traffic in general. I think what the study did say is that it's doable to convert Main and Vine, but there's a couple larger projects that we've got to see what happens. We've got to see what happens with the Newtown Pike extension and how much traffic's taken off of some of the downtown streets, and we've got to see what happens with Town Branch Commons.
How much is a bicycle-friendly, pedestrian friendliness, how much is that taken into account in these studies?
It's taken into account significantly, actually. I think what all traffic engineers want to do now is this complete streets approach, and so taking into account all users, whether it's transit users, bicyclists, pedestrians, as well as vehicular traffic. And so that was taken into account. There's obviously some things that will have to be worked out in the design phase in terms of the conversion of the north area streets if it's approved by council, but we will work to make sure that it's accommodating to all those modes.
What will that entail, and do you have any idea how expensive it will be if those the streets that have now been talked about as having being changed over to two-way traffic, if that happens, what would it entail?
I think the cost estimate at this point is about $1 million for the construction. So, and really what that involves is restriping, obviously, to go from one-way to two-way, and then some traffic signal changes, obviously, to accommodate traffic coming in the opposite direction.
This is a city that has a lot of traffic lights. When Man of War was opening up, and I was starting my career here at WKYT, we were, you know, the first 2 or 3 years, there would be a new section would open up, and there would be a big ribbon cutting and all of that.
Right.
Well, at this point, there are, what, 42 lights on Man of War?
I believe that,
and the plan was
sounds
8.
like the right number, yes.
I can remember. They said
Right.
there would be 8 lights on Man of War.
Right, right. So over time, development has happened along Man of War, which honestly, development's a good thing for the city. So I don't think it's a bad thing. But over time, the traffic volumes have increased, the side street traffic volumes have increased, and that's the reason for traffic signals.
What causes a traffic light to go up? Who decides that?
There are federal guidelines, and you have to meet several different what they call traffic signal warrants. And so those warrants take into account volume, delay. They also could take into account pedestrian volumes, among other things.
Timing of lights.
Right.
When Mayor Jim Gray ran for office in 2010, he was saying, you know, that's an important thing. I will get traffic moving. And apparently there was a new system that was put in. And some people say, well, is it really that much better with the timing?
We have, honestly, we have a fairly advanced traffic signal system. So we've got a central signal system. We've got about 3/4 of our signals that communicate back to our traffic management center with fiber optics. And so that's really tremendously advanced. That's even more advanced than the system that Nashville has. So it really is an advanced system. We've also got 4 traffic signal engineers that are retiming lights on a consistent basis. So I think some of the things that people perceive as probably problems with traffic signal timing could be collisions and traffic's backed up because of collisions or construction or a number of other things.
Well, let's talk about perception a little bit. Are there rules about how long a light can be?
That's called the signal cycle length, yes, and we make that a specific length, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And some people perceive that they're sitting at a light for minutes on end, which is not likely true.
What would you say the longest light in town is?
I would say that a long cycle length is 180 seconds, and so you would only sit there for some portion of that 180 seconds.
Are there any emerging trends in traffic patterns in neighborhoods or around schools as the city continues to grow that you see happening?
I think we've got a congestion issue around UK campus, specifically around the hospitals. And then we obviously have the reversible lane system on Nicholasville Road, and so I think that helps the situation around campus. But just as traffic volumes increase, I think that's an issue nationwide. And I think, we talked a little bit before the interview, I think where we are as a country is we kind of have all this deferred maintenance for traffic, transportation infrastructure, and we've really got to maintain what we have rather than build new roads, or widen existing roads. So I think that's where we are, and traffic management will become critical in the future.
Do you keep your eye on other possible emerging trends as, at some point we're going to have at least autonomous cars, if not driverless cars.
Right.
You said you've been in this 12 years. I mean, the estimates are another 12 years will be there.
Absolutely. And it's really fascinating, and it's fascinating to see how fast times are changing, but what's called connected vehicles is really on the horizon, and I think we're there. And what connected vehicles is the vehicles will be talking to roadside infrastructure. So we've already got Bluetooth travel time readers on Man of War right now. So that's basically people's cell phones talking to roadside infrastructure and telling us how fast people are going on Man of War. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think there's a lot more to come in that area.
How much do you look at what happens in other communities? And of course, you have the experience of having done a lot of projects. But for instance, the Double Diamond crossover out here at Harrodsburg came from another community.
Right. And we actually have one of the double crossover diamonds in Tennessee with another one under construction. And unique construction things like that are really critical. And what the double crossover diamond does, it saves cost. So you don't have to rebuild bridges associated with an interchange reconstruction, which is critical.
Can the public be a part of traffic planning going forward?
Absolutely. I think, we get citizen feedback on a regular basis, whether it be for traffic signal timing or signage or striping or whatever it may be. And so we encourage citizen feedback and would love to hear what some of the issues are in town.
Do you see mass transit growing in importance? I know obviously there are a lot of advocates for it who want more of it, but Americans seem to love their cars, huh?
I think that's true. I think that there is a shift, especially with the younger generation. I think there's a shift in terms of, is it your dream to own a car and drive everywhere? I don't think that's the case anymore. And I think we'll see a shift towards higher transit use, but I think Lexington's a city where that's going to be slower than some of the other urban areas.
Light rail is not something that would be on the immediate horizon, for instance?
I doubt it. Yeah, I mean, and infrastructure projects like that are so expensive. So, I think we've really got to evaluate. You've got to evaluate ridership and where people want to go, and I think all of those things are critical.
Well, is there anything out there on the drawing boards that the public may not know about that is coming down the horizon, or that the city may be looking into in terms of how to get people from point A to point B in the future?
One thing that we are going to do this year, hopefully, is get our traffic camera feeds out to the public. So out to the public via an internet site or an app. And I think what that'll let people do is better gauge travel times, better make travel times more reliable. And so you would be able to look at a camera on your route, say from Man o' War to Richmond Road, and see, is traffic backed up? Should I take another route? And so I think that'll allow people more flexibility in their travel planning.
Kind of know what you're facing.
Right.
All right. Dal Hoskins-Squire, Lexington's Director of Traffic Engineering, thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And we thank you for joining us for this edition of Kentucky Newsmakers on WKYT. I'll see you bright and early this week on WKYT This Morning. We start at 4:30, and we hope you make it a good week ahead.